Once around the park, James, and don't spare the horses.
It's showtime.
And it is showtime. Tuesday, February the 4th. It's the daily edition of On the Ledge, your Ontario Politics podcast. And as I have been wont to do lately, I want to just let you know, as we record this, we begin our conversation at 12 minutes after 3 on Tuesday afternoon. So you may be listening to it sometime Wednesday morning. Things may have changed by the time you hear it, but the content and the analysis and everything else will not. So that's why we've got the crew around the table, and that's what we've been trying to do with the daily. Needless to say, there's been no shortage of fun stuff to talk about and stuff to stick handle around. And we've been doing it on a daily basis since the writ period began last week. Today, around the table, we're happy to welcome in Bob Richardson, who, of course, spends time with the Hammersmith consulting team, but also a good deal of experience and background, war rooms, political advice for all kinds of folks and campaigns over the year. Anna Bailão is here, back with us, the former deputy mayor of Toronto. Last time we recorded, we were stick handling. Was it March 1st? Was it February 1st? And things changed just in the course of the recording of our podcast. So lots was going on. It was insane. And Sheila Regehr is here. She's the chair of the Basic Income Canada Network. And we'll want to talk a little bit about experience from that sort of that nonprofit view, the need to get to policy, and those conversations, and I think are all important. But out of the gate, just as we were getting ready to come on, I got an email from Andrew Enns at Regehr, and I'll just throw the numbers out here. These have just been posted. PCs at 47%, Liberals at 23%, NDP 17%, the Green at 8%. Bob, does that kind of jive with your vibe and your read of how people are feeling today?
I think I think things are moving. I think it's tightening up a bit. I think that might be a little bit on the high end for the Conservatives. But there's no question they're ahead. There's no question he dominated the airwaves for the last week on the tariff discussion. There was basically no oxygen for either of the opposition leaders. So I'm not surprised to see that. Whether or not that's going to hold for the next 3 weeks is the key question. We've got a 30-day pause on tariffs. Means you can't really talk about it every day, and you got to start talking about things that you should be doing when you're the Premier of Ontario. You should be talking about affordability, you should be talking about healthcare, education, and the economy in general, particularly employment, which is not great here. So I think they're in for a bit of a tougher ride for the remaining two or 3 weeks in this election than they had in the opening gambit.
Anna, the thing that strikes me is two things. First is that there was an Ipsos poll out on the weekend, and it had the Tories up in the 50% mark. And I think the guys at Ipsos noted that a Conservative party had never had that kind of support since 1929. And we all know what happened then. So let's not hope for a repeat. But the thing that strikes me about these numbers today from Regehr is that even combined, the Liberals and the NDP are well behind what the Tories are doing in terms of performance.
Yeah, and I think we see that in the campaigns. We continue to see people coming out in support of the Conservatives and Doug Ford that we're not used to seeing. Like we talked about some of the unions, they just had again, the Ontario Firefighters Association. So these are organizations that are not traditional supporters of the Conservatives, so they continue to eat into the other party's breakfast, lunch and dinner, to be honest with you. I think in the last few days we've seen better performance from the Liberals. It is interesting that the numbers from the NDP continue to go down, and I think it's a campaign that is not getting any traction. That is for sure. And so will this become a Liberal Conservative? It very much might be, just because, as Bob said, and as we said when I participated on Friday, it's going to be really hard to sustain this tariffs issue for the next 3 weeks. The issue of affordability, the issue of healthcare, all these issues are going to have to start to come up, and the record of the current government, a government that has been there for 7 years, is going to have to start being put to the test, and how they hold on that. It's what this campaign is going to be all about.
Well, affordability is what you all about at the Basic Income Canada Network, Sheila, and I wonder whether or not you saw that reprieve, that even though it's only 30 days, to be something of a bonus or some relief for you and your group, just to be able to say, finally now, to Bob's point, we've got to get off the tariffs solely in terms of conversation. We do need to start having substantial debate and discussion around the bigger issues. And if affordability is an issue, then the guaranteed income should be on that conversation list.
Yeah, it's really quite interesting. I agree with Bob that the dynamic really has changed now, that we're looking at still impending tariffs. This has not gone away, and we know that it's going to hurt people. It's not going to hurt people very much, like me, for sure. But there are people who are already struggling. So we've got this new problem of, tariffs and this adjusted relationship with the United States added on to a whole bunch of problems that we haven't solved, and that both provincial and federal governments haven't done a very good job at. And that's making sure that Canadians really do have some kind of reasonable income security in a very precarious world.
Well, let me ask you then, Sheila, when you saw this kind of playing out, and it's always been the long play in terms of how you guys have sort of figured out where your success is going to lie. And I say this with all due respect, but how much of a distraction does a campaign become from the real work that you want to get done and get results for?
Oh, I think you just have to take advantage of every opportunity, and sometimes in chaos there is opportunity. Even just today, I was on a webinar that was hosted by the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, and they talked about a paper that a couple of guys had written that look at different ways that we can get at the guy who's running the American administration now, that are not just about tariffs. There are lots of really creative ideas, but one of them is actually bringing back something like CERB on a more permanent basis that gives Canada some stability, some flexibility, capacity for people, ability to innovate, and look to the future economy, not the past one, but the future one. And I think, at least a couple of the parties are talking about some form of income protection. The Greens have a long-standing commitment to basic income. The NDP, I believe, are talking about some form of income protection that's not CERB, but maybe something like CERB. I don't know. So the conversation is out there, and the need is not going away. I mean, clearly.
Well, Bob, I heard that the premier or the Conservative leader in Ottawa today on his campaign stop, and his announcement was he was going to upload the LRT to the province, and everybody was excited about that, and that was a conversation worth having. But one of the things that he really stressed was the need to get to action, get to doing things, and he said at COVID speed. And to Sheila's point, it was sort of reminiscent of, we need to get stuff done now. We learned from COVID, perhaps. Is there something that we can do and get involved with or present that helps inoculate us from what's coming? Because just because we got 30 days reprieve doesn't mean, that's the end of the road. There's still going to be the possibility of problems. We've got a chance to put something on the table. Is that kind of an announcement the kind of thing where policymakers should be looking at it seriously and putting it in the campaign platform?
Well, number one, if you're going to talk about doing stuff at, quote, COVID speed, you should get a number of your existing files done at way less than COVID speed and finished. Let's start with the Eglinton LRT, which is in year 12 or year 14. Anna, you would know better than I. but like there are a number of things that have been sitting out there. There's problems in our schools that need retrofitting that needs to be done, and people have known that. And by the way, this isn't just a Doug Ford issue. It's been going on for a number of years. Healthcare, particularly emergency healthcare in rural areas, needs to be taken care of. So too often with this government, it's whatever the most recent shiny bauble is has to be dealt with at COVID speed. Let's get some of the basics done now. It's well over time for a number of these items. Let's get those taken care of. And I think that to a certain degree, Ontarians are starting to get a little skeptical on these sort of pronouncements when they see what in actual fact has happened in terms of delivery in the last 7 years.
So what's important there, though, then, Bob, as we move into the end of the second week, and I know it's only Tuesday, but I'm thinking of it's going to come in a hurry. How do you advise any one of the campaigns to say, okay, this is the opportunity to really reinforce or shift or focus or sharpen that discussion to get it off tariffs?
Well, I think the Conservatives have done a very good job controlling the message and controlling the oxygen. I give them full marks. I think they need to turn into a little bit of a broader economic message, but still keeping a lot of that message that they have with tariffs going forward. For the Liberals, I think they should go hard on healthcare. I think they should go hard on healthcare, hard on affordability, and quite frankly, hard on employment. That's what I would do. And she should be back to basics, and she should be saying, I'm going to get things done. I'm making promises to do those sort of stuff. Marit Stiles, I find, I like Marit Stiles. I went and saw her speak at the Empire Club. I thought she was quite good. But they seem to be a bit issue a day-ish, if I can call it that, a little bit all over the ground. I think that they have to take a good look at their campaign, focus on one or two things, and drill down. Because right now she's a bit of the beige wallpaper of Ontario politics. She's kind of there, but she's kind of all over the place. And I think they need to get more focused.
Can I pick up on that, Dave? Because actually, Marit is my MPP, and she's very personable. She's very
I agree.
Good. I'm actually quite surprised how little traction they're getting because they have also a likable leader, but they're not getting the traction, the message. There's no message in there. Like you can't grab on to anything. So it's been really hard for them. With regards to that messaging about the tariffs, how to get out of that. I think it's going to be really hard just because it's in everybody's mind. Like if you own a business, if you work for a business that is going to get impacted. But the reality is that because some of the work has not been done properly, we're not as well prepared to deal with this. And I think that's the connection the opposition would have to make. Everybody says as soon as tariffs come in, we're going to have a recession. Well, if you don't have good employment, affordability, supports, healthcare, you're going to have a harder time to fight that recession and support the residents and support the businesses. So you haven't done it up to now, and what are you going to do from now on? And I think the opposition needs to make that connection. And I think they're trying. I see some of that messaging, but it's not penetrating. It's not getting people yet. Hopefully, we'll have more of the discussion around that, how we're going to deal with a recession, how we're going to support our local business, not just saying, I'm going to give you billions. Well, how? What are you going to do? How are you going to support? What kind of activities? How are you going to do this? And that's the kind of conversation that we need to have.
So, Sheila, turn the lens around then for me, because we're talking about the political parties and the campaigns focusing that messaging. How do you get their attention then in that noisy world to make sure that, they're talking about your issue at the right time, in the right place, in front of the right people?
I don't know how you get through the attention on the tariffs except to find every opportunity. I want to build on what Anna said too. I think what I'm seeing as a real struggle with a lot of the parties is vision. I mean, we've talked about all of the things that are undone, and that haven't been great for a long time, not just recent political parties, but I mean, this is 40 and 50 years in the making. I mean, we really shouldn't be surprised that we're here. COVID should have been a bigger wake-up call than it was. I mean, I'd like to see real vision for the future, and I don't see it in any of the parties right now, which I think is a real challenge for people. And I think it's why the tariff thing becomes the bauble that we now all look at now, because we've made so little progress on some of the other issues. I mean, I look at the health and education. I've got a 13-year-old grandson that I had brunch with the other day. He's going into high school. He has to pick electives. He has to pick high school. And he's preparing for a future where nobody knows what it's going to look like. Young people now are really struggling. They're not invested in politics at all. They're getting their news from all kinds of strange sources. We really have a lot of challenges. So it's hard for anybody to break through, except that we absolutely have to do something, and it has to be forward looking. And I just keep seeing path dependency and tinkering around the edges and more of the same. I'm looking for radical.
What was the radical center? Was that the phrase that Jean Chrétien used a couple of weeks ago? Bob, you know.
I think one of the reasons why parties are lacking vision this time is, quite frankly, they're flying by the seat of their pants. This election was called a year and a half early. They're scrambling to put candidates in place, financing. They're scrambling to get their bus out. They're scrambling to get day-to-day announcements done. So it's hard to focus, and it's kind of hard to have a comprehensive vision when, you know, you're filling your gas tank or your bus up. You know, it's that. That's what's going on. So that's one of the problems of calling an early election. I understand why the Conservatives did it. I think strategically it was smart, but it does impact on the quality of the election.
Well, even Anna, you look at the preparation of the third parties who want to actually get involved in terms of advertising. They were more or less caught off guard in terms of how they could spend their money, where they could spend their money, get an effective campaign out. So even that's been stunted.
100%. I mean, I agree with everything Bob has said so much. I think they are definitely scrambling. I've talked with candidates from different parties, to be honest with you, and you know, people don't even have signs ordered to put up, some of them. It's been really tough to get the campaigns. And again, but I do understand why they did it. It's politically, strategically very smart. But it is, I think, the ones that end up losing, it's all of us, because this is a time that we could use actually some boldness. I mean, there is going to be some structural and fundamental changes that I think are going to come down the line. I think that, you know, the fact that more and more the provinces are saying, this is it, we're going to have to start trading with each other a lot more. We're going to have to address these issues in between us. We're going to have different partners to trade with, and not only the states. The fact that, for example, the Premier announced the upload of the LRT, this is a response to an issue that needs structural change, which is the way that municipalities are governed and the relationship between the municipalities and the province. So this is the time to have like a lot of good conversations around this. Obviously, you know, elections, some might say, are never a good time to have these conversations. Many people would argue, but some of these actions are a response to that. And I think we won't have it just because it's so tight and so fast. I mean, look at this. We're almost like, we basically have 2.5 weeks of campaigning. It's going so fast.
I just want to come back to some of the Regehr numbers and get your read on this, Bob, because on the one hand, the Conservative Party, significant lead over the NDP Liberals, particularly combined. But when you look at the impressions that the leaders are making, there's less of a gap between Premier Ford and Bonnie Crombie. And this has been all about, got to get to know Bonnie. Now, in each case, there has been improvement in terms of the perception of them. And I think the Captain Canada thing has helped Ford. Does this interregnum from the conversation around tariffs. Is that how important is that for Crombie and Stiles, let's say, because we're still getting to know both of them in the context of campaigning?
Well, only one leader has got bombed relentlessly so far in this campaign in the last year, and that's Bonnie Crombie. She's probably had several $1 million worth of negative advertising put on her, so she's starting from a little bit farther behind. And the Conservatives did a good job, in my opinion, of trying to define her. And they've been out spending heavily to do so. The Premier's got a good brand. They're reinforcing it almost every day with the announcements that he's doing. So for his voters, they like what he sees. I'm not sure he's reaching out much farther than that. And Marit Stiles, I like her. I agree with Anna completely. I like her on a personal basis, but I can't think of a thing that stuck with me that she said in this campaign so far. So I think they've got a message problem that they desperately need to fix. I would also add one thing, Dave. I'd be cautious a little bit on the polling from Regehr and Abacus. Two other firms, Liaison and Main Street, have a much tighter election than these other guys do, and both of them have been in the game regularly in Ontario for the last few years and have a pretty good track record. So I think the numbers are a little high on some of these firms, and I think it's probably somewhere a little bit more in the middle. I just offer that as a caution.
Well, I would channel our friend John Wright and just say it's all about methodology without getting down on the weeds. What he would say is look for the consistency and the trend in each individual pollster, and when we see a drop or a spike, that's when you'll probably want to pay attention to. I agree with you. You're going to look at variations, and he would say, when we were doing polling at such and such a place, and if we looked at somebody else, they would consistently be 8 or 5% higher than we were, no matter how we did it based on methodology. But to your point, that affects the way people vote, Sheila. When they see polling results, they see how the campaign is shaking out. We all want to think we're smart enough to make our own decisions. And I'm not bashing the pollsters. They've got a role to play here. But that does play into how we view where we are and how we view where we may vote.
Well, I was just thinking the same thing as Bob was talking and wondering whether this whole tariff thing and the, proud to be Canadian thing again might affect who votes this time. And the, voter turnout amongst more aware people could shift things. I must say I am a bit worried about the whole Captain Canada branding thing and whatever. I mean, it sounds really good to people who don't pay attention to news and don't pay attention to policy, but the problems that we see once tariffs get imposed, all of the structures that have led to problems in our healthcare system, problems in education, all of this is still going to be there, and it's going to be compounded for people that are still struggling. I hope some of those people are going to wake up and pay attention more and really do vote this time. Like, stand up and really, put your vote where your mouth is. If you are Canadian, if you are Ontarian, and you really care about what's happening with your democracy in your country, just pay attention more.
Yeah, it's an observation.
I would also say that at this time, especially at the beginning of the election, it is really important to see what happens between the Liberals and the NDP. Right. They were so close when the election started. It is really interesting now to see the NDP going down, Liberals going up. So clearly there is a movement that might turn the Liberals into the official opposition if they don't, get any further. And for me, to be honest with you, what gets really interesting is to see how this translates into the seats. Because these numbers sometimes don't mean much depending where the vote is. So I'll be really interesting when we start seeing some of these numbers translate into where are they and how many seats each party is actually about to have. So for me, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, the efficiency of the vote has become a standard part of that conversation, and certainly we learned that on a federal level. When the premier was in Ottawa this week, actually earlier today, and making his LRT comments and everything else, and that was the point of it. And he still touched on the development around the tariffs. The first question out of the gallery there was about his open mic, and after his event the day before, he dropped an F-bomb with an open mic, saying that, he liked Trump on the day he was elected, but since then, now that, the tariffs have come in, he's taken a knife and effing stabbed me in the back, or stabbed me with it. And he didn't know the mic was on, but that was the first question and the focus of the media when they got a chance to ask questions.
Why did you support Mr. Trump ahead of the election when it was clear he was going to target Canada with tariffs?
Well, you know something, I always believe in working with anyone. And on the hot mic, he makes me swear once in a while. I think he makes a lot of people swear in this country. So I thought it'd be a little different, a little change, but obviously he decided to pull the knife out and stab us. And when I'm there, my number one job is to protect Ontario, to protect Canadians. That's exactly what I'm going to do. I will fight with every single tool I have in our toolbox to make sure we defend the people of Ontario and, in return, defend the people of Canada.
And that's just the rising anthem behind him, Bob. It's cinematic. I mean, he is really good at that kind of response.
He is really good at that kind of response. You're 100% right. He does it well. I think this is a bit of a blip. It does give some people a little bit of caution. Geez, because most Canadians do not support or did not support Donald Trump, so he would be very much in a minority in that. And I would suggest you a fairly small minority in comparison to what went on in the U.S. So look, he is. He'll get, this is a nothing issue. He'll get by it in a day, but it does show you that you can only talk about tariffs for so long, and you can only talk about protecting Ontario for so long in that context. There are other issues he's going to have to deal with, and he's got to come up to speed on them a little bit more, and he's got to be prepared to take some heat on those issues too as well.
Well, maybe even to make the point, Anna, yesterday, he came out with the guns a-blazing. We're taking all the alcohol off the shelves. We're going to cancel our deal with Elon Musk. Elon Musk on Twitter said, oh, well, what big deal. He wasn't really fussed by it. So it really kind of underlined what Bob was saying. There's a lot of fire and bluster in it from here and from our perspective. People were cheering about it, and liberals kind of tripping over themselves to say, hey, that was our idea. So now that that's out of the way, but you got to wonder, when we begin to look at that, the other side of it was, and Sheila referred to this already, is that this conversation has required us to sharpen our focus in terms of how do we foundationally create or reinvent or reconnect or reinvigorate an economy that will be inoculated from the whims of a Trump or Trump 2.0, whoever comes after him. So this question around provincial barriers, for example, I'm glad to see has become more of the narrative on this. So it's going to be an important part of this conversation.
100%. And I think several premiers are talking about it. Federal government is talking about it. So I think it is something that is going to come out of this. If the tariffs happen or not, I think we still have a little bit of hope, I think, that it might not happen. Not a lot, given everything that we've been living through the last few weeks. But even if it was not to happen, I think it has had an impact on the relationship between Canada and the States. It has had an impact on how business is going to be conducted between provinces. And there's no doubt about it. I think that they've resuscitated a huge nationalistic sentiment in Canadians.
And to that end, Bob, I was talking to somebody today, and it was, in the mining sector, and they are looking at being able to, promote the idea of more investment in the north and that sort of thing. A year ago, there was sort of mildly on the radar. Today, it's on the radar. And that level of, I want to buy Canadian, I want to be Canadian, I want to say to hell with the Americans, we're not going to put up with their BS on that front. There are businesses out there right now who see that fervor as an opportunity to kind of move things forward and in a hurry.
For sure. And I hate to say this, but we can thank Donald Trump a bit for giving our heads a shake. For 20 or 30 years, we've failed to diversify our trade, and we're at the same number as we were 30 years ago when Prime Minister Trudeau's father was the Prime Minister. That's got to be fixed. We've got to do more trade with the EU. We've got to do more trade with Australia, as an example. We need a free trade deal with Great Britain. We need to close on that and get that done. And we need to get more aggressive about it. I think we've been a little docile in terms of getting those things done. Interprovincial trade, we talk about it all the time and we don't make any progress. It's got to get fixed, and somebody's got to take the lead on this and plow through and get it done. Same thing on oil and gas projects, pipelines, things of that nature, infrastructure. We're good on talk and we're good on consultation. We aren't good on getting anything done. So it's kind of, we're the authors of our own problems to a certain extent on a number of these things, and we've got to get moving and get them fixed. I'm not blaming any one party or any one premier or prime minister or things like that. It's gone on for a long time. So, but it's the wake up call's been given. And if we want to continue to be, a sovereign state, we gotta move, we gotta act, and we gotta get busy real fast.
Well, Sheila, I thought of you when they started talking about provincial trade barriers and so on, and it even comes down to how they define certain circumstances and based on the benefits that they hand out. And you and I have talked about the Canada Disability Benefit, for example, and ODSP here in Ontario. Each province has its own definition of poverty. Each province has its own definition of, disability, for example. If we could take a step in terms of the trade barriers, maybe we take a step in defining some of these benefit programs that in the long run are going to save us money and generate a more foundationally stronger economy.
They're good for us and they're a danger to Trump, because his own country is like a mess domestically compared to some of the good universal policies we have here, like healthcare, like our kids and seniors benefits. Like, we are in a really good position in Canada to do some very positive things. I was thinking the same thing when Bob was talking, that it's not just about these provincial trade relationships. It's about federal, provincial, territorial relationships more generally. I think that we really need to strengthen and find a way to cooperate better across a whole slew of social and economic policy areas. Maybe Trump has done us a favor. I mean, we really have to be cognizant of our size, and that our neighbor is 10 times the size. We, in my view, can't afford to let anybody be languishing in a tent or in line at a food bank or any other way locked out of an economy that needs all of our people, all of our skills and talents. There's no sense having a great educational system if there's nothing at the end of it for you. We need to get better at being Canadian. And we've got lots of opportunities to do that.
Being Canadian and attract investment and human capital to Canada. I mean, we used to go out there and say, come to Canada. We have all this market south of us, and we have great quality of life. So you can live in here, you can have your business here, and you have access to this market. That's going to change, right? That is really going to change. So it has to be a new mentality. How we're going to continue to attract capital, all these internal tariffs, the way that we tax business, the way that we tax people, we're going to have to look at all that if we want to continue to grow economically, if we want to continue to attract capital to create jobs, and to continue to attract human capital to come to this country and have the best minds still picking Canada to come to here. So it's going to have to be a big shift not only the tariffs, but actually towards our attitude, because one of the big reasons, one of our selling features used to be the proximity and the close relationship with the states, and that Trump has shown to the world that is not what it used to be.
Well, interesting. The number that came out that caught my ear, and I think probably contextualizes the effect of this, Bob, really effectively, is to say that the interprovincial barriers are the same or worse than the tariffs that Trump was going to slap on us yesterday at 25%. And we're all upset about that. So this might be the thing that moves the rock up the hill.
Yeah, and we need an interprovincial trade czar. I hate to say that everyone wants to be a czar nowadays, but we need somebody to take this on and to really drive it. I was talking to a former premier just last week on this, and he said he tried to, in his own province, move things forward and get things done, and he was greeted to a brick wall on half of the things and just couldn't make the progress that he thought he was going to be able to. So there's entrenched interests there. It's going to be tough. It's not going to happen overnight, but we have really, really, really got to get at this one.
But sometimes crises like this create the environment and the
That's
opportunity.
Right. Absolutely.
So I think that we do have an opportunity here to have a serious conversation about this, because what was yesterday, it's not today. The market is not there. So they're going to have to look at the other provinces as a possible market.
Yeah, the whole line, don't waste a good crisis. I mean,
exactly.
Right. That's right.
I want to talk about a little bit about more of the local politics, because, out of everybody I know, Bob, you're the guy who's probably plugged in more off the top of your head in terms of how riding's playing out across the province, never mind across the country. Is it good politics for the mayor of Brampton to be actively campaigning effectively against Bonnie Crombie?
Well, we haven't seen that, I don't think, too much before in Ontario. I was trying to think of it. Usually mayors have tried to keep their powder dry. I think, shall we say, a number of the mayors feel under a degree of pressure from the governing party to take part in partisan events. We saw that. We've seen it in Niagara. We've seen it in Brampton. We saw it today in Ottawa. That's not traditionally been the case. But I think a number of folks are, shall we say, feeling the heat to a certain extent. I'm not sure that is a great thing to do, and I think it might be a little bit of overreach here. But it is what it is, and you need to get on with it. So, but I think the mayor of Brampton. I think there's some local politics there too, because there was some tension between him and Mayor Crombie as well. So I think there's a little bit of that going on as well.
Well, there's also the headline is not who's running against Bonnie Crombie by name, Bob. It's Patrick Brown's mother-in-law is running against.
Yeah,
so
I don't even know her name. I just know it's Patrick Brown's mother-in-law.
Sylvia Gualtieri. There you
go. Gualtieri, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it's one of those things where Anna, it becomes this maybe a distraction outside, but it's an aggravation that all of a sudden it's kind of like being sued by somebody in a nuisance suit, because it doesn't going to matter to anything, but you got to hire a lawyer and you got to go to court and you got to deal with it, and there's a distraction from everything else you're doing. And at this stage of the game, it might sound small, but it's one of those things that, I don't know that Bonnie Crombie can afford.
Yeah, especially the local race, right? You want the leader to win the riding. And from what I can see, I think the Conservatives are putting quite a bit of resources in the riding. So it's going to be an interesting local race. There's going to be a lot of people in there. Obviously, that's also a way to keep liberal volunteers and resources from going into other campaigns. So It's very strategic. That's what's happening there as well. And so it's part of the political game. It's very strategic as well.
Well, and indeed, out of all of this, Sheila, when you look at, for example, here in Ontario, we had the pilot project under the Kathleen Wynne government for basic income. Is any of what you're having to say at a political level, not just in Ontario, because I know we're going to have a federal election soon, is there a place where you're seeing it sort of percolate to the top as part of the conversation as a solution to some of the things that we've discussed? But guaranteed income, that is?
Yeah, so just on this specific issue, if we're talking about COVID speed, this is the issue. I mean, this is the thing that everybody needs to understand. And it's because that fortunately the pilot in Ontario lasted long enough that we did get really, really good results before Ford decided to cancel it. So we know that it acts really fast to stabilize lives, to let people adjust, to transform. This is, like the way you're able to go back to school and enter the labor force in a different place, in a different sector, as the economy shifts. It gives people hope. And I think everything that we're dealing with needs to give us hope and needs to give us a path forward, and a way to be part of the solution rather than being seen as part of the problem. But it also does raise issues. I mean, there's a pattern here. We talk about Donald Trump not being trustworthy. Well, I mean, and I'm nonpartisan. I have to be in the work that we do. We work with everybody. But Ford promised that he was going to let the pilot continue, and he lied. And it was one of the first things that he disbanded, and it was because it was working. Trump is accused of being a bully and, favoring his friends. Well, some of those accusations are pretty apt as well in some circumstances here. So, it's not the only issue, obviously, but if people don't have income security, they are not going to have good health. They are not going to have educational opportunities. They are not going to be part of the solution. So this is one of those COVID speed things that really does need to happen. Municipalities are calling for this. So if we're looking at a new Canada and new federal, provincial, territorial relations, we need to include municipalities in that too, because they are now bearing the brunt of all of the failures of federal and provincial policy in taking care of people. So, we've got work to do. But the solutions are there. We'd be tearing our hair out if it looked like we didn't have anything and we didn't know what to do. We know what to do. We need to find the people who have the courage to do it.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody today. The time for study and research is all done. We're in a moment and an opportunity for action. And I think, Bob, you made the point in terms of that's how we're going to deal with trade across the country. Does any of this, and I've been asking this in every episode, every day, in the past, Anna, the debates, they come, they go. I got interesting perspectives from John Tory and Tim Hudak the other day in terms of how they prepared for it and how scary it was to sit in that studio with only the moderator in the room and the cameras on and not really knowing whether or not you were being able to engage with the audience. Does this shift in the tariffs now make it more difficult or easier for the opposition to kind of make their point? Because clearly now tariffs can't be the only thing we're going to talk about, and the debate, whenever that happens, is going to be the focus of that. Tariffs will be a part of it, but we're going to get to what Sheila was talking about. We're going to get to the healthcare Bob was talking about. We're going to get to the education. The Conservatives are going to have to answer for that in there. Does this change the calculus at all?
I think that the Conservatives are going to continue as long as possible to make the tariffs the issue. And I think again, like I said before, the opposition parties need to bring those issues and connect the record from the last few years to the capacity to respond to these tariffs that you need in the healthcare, in creating jobs, in fighting for the economy. Have you been doing that for the 7 years? That's the connection that they have to make. How effective have you been over the last 7 years? And given that this will be the most difficult time, are you the right person and the right party to be in there? Are they going to be successful in making that connection? I'm not sure, but that's what they need to do, in my opinion.
Well, Bob, then is the debate then sort of a focal point for if we're going to have a change election, it's changing the ballot question. Is that the place to do that?
Yeah, I certainly is. Does this change the calculus? Big time. This is the first break that Bonnie Crombie and Marit Stiles have had since the call of this election. Up until this point, Doug Ford has been able to very successfully control the message and kind of control the political oxygen out there. It's now going to be a little fairer. Other issues are going to have to come up. The Conservative campaign is going to have to pivot somewhat, and if they do that well, they will likely roll on to victory. If they don't do that well, it could turn into a little bit more of a race. So I think that's what we're going to find out in the next week or two, and the debate is a critical point in that. People aren't checking in that much because there's so much going on. There's a federal Liberal leadership. There's the tariff thing going on. There's a million different things going on. So I think the debate will be crucial because it'll be the one time when people are focused on the provincial issue, and they'll be making a number of decisions at that time.
Yeah, well, and as we've already learned, day to day today, there's a whole new layer of complexity and questions to be asked. So
I would dare to say hour to hour to hour.
You're the optimist. Okay, way to go. Sheila Regehr, Anna Bailão, Bob Richardson, thanks for this, and we'll have you all back. I've got you in the calendar, so we're looking forward to watching how this unfolds and your contributions. So thanks for being here. This has been great. It's On the Ledge, your Ontario Politics podcast, and you can find us on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. Also, if you prefer to listen on the iPod, and you can check it out on, let's see, we've got us on Spotify, on Apple, on iHeart, and Google now actually has the podcast, including with the video. So there's no shortage of opportunity. And of course, we drop in on News Talk 1010 just before the morning show. So, and if you're not up early enough at 5 o'clock in the morning to listen to it on the radio, there's no excuse for you not to be able to listen to us. If you've got something that you want to add or question, or you want to scream at us, you can go to my website, davetrafford.com. We've got a talkback message button there. Hit the button, leave your message, and we'll do our best to include it in the programming. Other than that, we'll leave it there for the day. As I said, things may change by the time you listen to this, but the analysis and the good guidance that we got from our guests will not. So enjoy the show and do, make sure you come back. It's On the Ledge, your Ontario Politics podcast, the daily edition. I'm Dave Trafford for Story Studio Network.
This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.